Hello, welcome to the Nitty Gritty Writing Podcast. I'm Simon Canton.
And I'm Dave Higgins.
And this week we're going to be talking about what influence a spoken language or written language has on fiction. But before we do that, we'll do our usual weekly roundup. And Dave, you can go first.
Okay. Written and published another drabble. Most of the way through polishing a story I need to get in for a submission call for the end of next month, so that's good. What else? My wife is off to a conference this weekend, so she took a couple of days off this week. So I spent those with her rather than working, so I'm a couple of days shorter than a usual week. But, so that's it for me.
Okay. For me, I'd probably start by saying that we've heard from Ed, and Ed has said that he's going to have to bow out from the podcast as being a regular. He'll still be back for guest slots, but because he's in the States. For us, this is evening time. And for him, this is the middle of the day, so he was having a lot of trouble scheduling because it's the middle of family time for him, whereas for us, it's kind of everything's quieter. So he's not going to be on every second week as he's been doing, but he might be on back as a guest. So that was unfortunate, but understandable, of course. So that's kind of Ed news. But for my news. Oh, and another thing, before I get into my news, we passed 50 episodes last week, and we didn't even mention it, but I thought I'd say, yay, just at the top before I forget it again. 50 episodes, not bad. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, that's some sort of milestone, I'm sure.
So anyway, sorry. For my week, I did 2 drabbles on Monday, and I liked both of them, so I sent one to my regular list with its 800 and something members, and another one to my street team or beta reading group, whatever you want to call it, which has like 35 members or whatever. And the response was very positive for both. And I mentioned on Facebook, in the self-publishing podcast group, that what we were doing, Dave, and about 100 people liked the thing, and a load of people commented and said, "Oh, I'm going to start doing that too." So you've started a movement. Okay. You infected us with the idea, and now I've spread it out to the rest of the writing world. So I think it's a massive positive, because what readers want is more writing from the writers they like. And now anyone who's subscribed to a writer is going to get more writing from that writer. So I think that's really good. So apart from that, I also did 3,000 words of a first draft of the new Dragons and Magic book. I didn't get any further because I had a major talk for... so as people know, I've been working on Writer Tracker. So I showed Writer Tracker a month or a month and a half ago to my bosses in work in my day job, and they went, "Oh, we like that. We want to make a similar system in my day job." So my department started making the system, and then that started...
Hello?
Oh, was it me that dropped out then?
You froze and disappeared.
Okay, then yeah, I thought it was you that was frozen, but no, I guess I've just been talking to myself for the last minute.
There's two of you. There's two little Nitty Gritty podcast things again. So something's happened. Yes.
It seems like
yes.
seems like
For
my
those of you who
connections.
are watching radio, things have gone wonky.
Yeah, it seems like my internet connection's not that stable because I got my little Google Drive icon down here and it went grey. So if I disappear again, you'll know that I've dropped out again. Hopefully it's back.
I'll try and be entertaining until you clamber back onto the internet. But you got as far as saying that your department were building something similar to Writer Tracker.
Yeah, so we're using the same. Basically, it's the stuff that I've built for Writer Tracker, only without the writing bit. So it's the same menu, the same all that kind of stuff. So the advantage is that then instead of me only being able to do it in a few hours every day, I can then use some of my day job time to both learn new technologies and also develop it further.
Yay!
So yeah, hopefully that'll be good news. But at the same time, this week and last weekend even, I worked a lot on my day job stuff. But I'm hoping that I can train some more people up in work so that it's not just me doing it, because that would be kind of silly. So that's why 3,000 words is less than I wanted. I was aiming for 1,000 a day, but I managed 3,000 out of whatever it's been, 5 days.
Yeah.
So a bit less, but not too bad either. 3,000 words at least gets us started. Anyway, so we can move on to the topic. So Alexander, who's one of my readers, he's been reading the Drabbles, and he sent me an email this week, and he said that we got to discussing different types of science fiction, and I mentioned Rick and Morty, the cartoon show on Adult Swim. And he said that he didn't really watch Western cartoons or Western shows because the types of storytelling were very chaotic, whereas Japanese, he's living in Japan, Japanese anime tends to be a rigid structure to it. So the way he put it was that in Western shows, things just happen for no reason, whereas in Japanese shows or Eastern shows, that there's a progression of events that he felt was more satisfactory than a Western show would be. Whereas I'm not an expert on anime by any means. I've seen Akira and a couple of other things, and that's about it. But I wouldn't find them appealing because I would say exactly the same thing, but from the other side, that they're too rigid and too structured and predictable. And that's not to say either that he's wrong or I'm wrong or whatever. It's just the types of storytelling.
There is it's coming out of a different sort of school of art. And if you go back to the 16th century, where in the Western world we had Shakespeare, which is sort of a mix of comedy and tragedy and serious stuff and surprises and reversals. They had Kabuki and No, both of which are very much about set roles. So it's not a direct comparison, but sort of it's as if Punch and Judy shows had been the primary means of entertainment and had developed as what it was like to tell a story. And then obviously, if you modernized Punch and Judy, it's going to come out as a very rigid story. It's exciting, but it's got a strong structure to it. Punch and Judy shows are very similar. Every Punch and Judy show is very similar. So yeah, there is that rigidity. But also, I was watching a documentary a few weeks ago on haiku, and it was a documentary series. So each episode they'd get the Japanese haiku master, who was linchpinning the series, and another haiku master. And the one I watched was the head of the Danish Haiku Society. But haikus are really big there. And at the end, they select their favorite haiku from a selection of skilled haiku. And the thing that came out of it again and again is that the Japanese master liked a soft ambivalence to it, whereas the sort of Scandinavian haiku school, they like a hard clarity to their haiku. So the really telling point, which potentially goes to the core of how the language difference makes for a strong indicator of how the whole story will go, is that the Japanese master's favorite haiku was around the second line started with something. And he loved it because it took this tight, structured, formal form and gave it the ability to draw on the user's experience, because this something could be anything, it could be mutable, but there was still structure. Whereas the Scandinavian haiku master thought that was the weakest of all of the ones they were selecting from because of something. It wasn't a description. Something is just a placeholder word. It doesn't mean anything. So it's almost a waste of a word. And it's interesting discovering, because you'd think if two people become very, very highly regarded at writing a particular very formal form, they wouldn't diverge so strongly to the point that one of them went, something is the greatest word ever, and one of them went, something is a really weak word. I don't really like anything with that in it.
I mean, I guess you can have that divergent opinion within a culture. I mean, Ernest Hemingway and Shakespeare are kind of both highly regarded, but both very, very different. So within a culture, it can be. I mean, something he was mentioning. I can look it up now, actually, in his email. But he was mentioning that there's phrases or like little kind of symbols in Japanese that mean that they're kind of a shorthand. They're called 4 comma, the number 4 comma. And what they do is they say they're essentially like a shorthand saying this kind of a hero and this kind of a heroine and this kind of a situation. So you got 3 symbols essentially telling you all the setup, because it's so structured that they can go, well, it's hero number 3 and it's heroine number 6 and it's situation number 2, and go. Which we certainly have. We have the hero's journey and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's not quite as rigid as that, I would say. Now, obviously, this is third hand. He's not Japanese. He's just learning. And I'm just relaying what he's told me on an email. So we could be taking it wrongly. But that was an interesting thought, that it could be so kind of language based that the language itself, obviously Japanese has more symbols, or more a shorter way of conveying more meaning than English would have, because we've got our longer words. but not only that, but there's even more brevity beyond that, where there's just a symbol that means this, and and whoever's reading that is so familiar will go, oh yeah, I know what that means. That was the same kind of thing that was set up in this story, and this story, and this story. I mean, we could kind of do that, but it would seem very hackneyed if in our books we wrote, here's John and he's an Indiana Jones type. People will go, really? You're not going to set it up at all? You're just going to go straight to he's Indiana Jones, just interpret it as that?
Yeah, it's almost the show versus tell thing, that modern Western writing advice is put the clues there and let the reader put them together and go, okay, this guy is like Indiana Jones. And if you're writing a guy who's like Indiana Jones, make sure that he isn't just Indiana Jones only. He cares a lot about his jacket instead of his hat or whatever. So we focus on the differences. I think that readers want to put it together and go, okay, this is kind of like Indiana Jones, only it's not a ripoff. So I don't know Japanese culture well enough to know if they have the same sort of people sitting around going, well, this anime is just a ripoff of that one, or if they really like similarity.
I don't know, because it seems like so people have been talking about Ghost in the Shell recently, which I believe is Japanese, but so it's
yeah.
But they were saying that it's the technology and the ideas in it that are very original. So it'd be like if you're writing a hard sci-fi, but you're writing it very formulaic, it's the science fiction ideas, the actual thought process you put behind it that makes it original, rather than like the three-body problem. Did you read that, Dave?
No.
That's Chinese rather than Japanese, but it's a very straightforward story. The only kind of twist is the tech in it. So it's fairly hard sci-fi, and the only thing going for it, like, it's just a conspiracy thing. Like, it's a straightforward A to B kind of thing. So I knew what was going on in terms of the plot within 10 pages.
Yeah.
And then it's just explaining it explains the history of the characters, but also the tech or the idea, the scientific idea behind the book, which I won't spoil because that's kind of the mystery, is what's going on with the science. But for me, that was quite a tough slog, because I would be more plot oriented. And there's plenty of Western books, I guess, would be the same, would be just straightforward plot, but it's the ideas. I mean, Neuromancer, you wouldn't say is the most convoluted or technical plot, or Ready Player One, a similar, like, that's just a fairly straightforward plot, but then it's the ideas of the world that make it interesting. So I'm not sure. I think you're definitely right. I think the cultural history of a nation or a geographical area can definitely have a lot to say, maybe more than the language. I've had this debate in work as well, because I've said in Norway, practically everyone has fairly good English. Not absolutely everyone. The older someone is, the less likely, but practically everyone has pretty good English. I said, well, you could have English as a second language in Norway, as a second main language, like not just learnt as a secondary language, and put all science and stuff in English and slowly transition over, because there's a lot of advantages to having a common language or a small set of common languages in the world. And debating it with a colleague, he was, well, then you lose Norwegian culture. And that's where kind of this comes from. Is it so Ireland obviously has lost the Irish language pretty much. There's certainly people who speak it daily, but they're by far in the minority. we're mostly a English-speaking country. But I wouldn't say that Irish culture has disappeared because of that. Like hurling and Gaelic football and things like that are still big. You've got Irish dancing and all that kind of stuff still going. You've still got Irish poetry and Irish everything. So I don't know. It's a difficult question, I think, on whether language is what influences culture or whether culture exists on its own.
The other thing, I don't know how the impact comes, is the way language is written. In English, you write a letter A, it's a sound. In Japanese, the kanji have meanings as well as sounds, and they have more than one meaning. So a word can have a certain, this is how it's pronounced, this is what it means, but also there can be other meanings that are underneath it. So it's a little bit like if your word could potentially mean three things, you can get context that this is what the word means, but also readers might know, well, it could mean that as well. So you can add potentially a density of nuance to the writing by using a word where one of the other meanings is also relevant. So again, that's going to have the sort of, you can put a symbol down and Japanese readers will know this is going on. They're a demon because their name includes kanji that are part of one of the ways of writing demon, as well as actually this particular word means a particular thing. So
sorry. So Harry Potter does that too. Like Malfoy has Mal in it, and pretty much everyone knows Mal means bad.
Yes.
I was thinking, actually, I noticed a slogan this week where the slogan was on a delivery truck and it said, "Your delivery is our business," which is obviously written by not a native English speaker, because in English it would have the second meaning of, well, that's our business to look in your parcel. Like the way it was written, like, your parcel is our business, so we're going to look in there and find out what it is. So yeah, anyway, sorry. I kind of derailed you there a bit. So yeah, I mean, one thing I was going to say was humor is definitely language oriented. That's one thing that I notice a lot here in Norway, is that Norwegian humor tends not to be very funny from my point of view, because Norwegian language has very few words compared to English. So rather than English will have 50 words that mean one thing, just slight variations, and depending on what word you use, it, as you said, David, has two like meanings. Whereas Norwegian, you just have one word or a couple of words, or 3 or 4 words if it's some common word, common meaning. So Norwegian comedy tends not to rely on nuances of language, at least in my experience. It tends to rely on very broad things, like people falling over. They still have blackface on Norwegian TV, which is pretty appalling from my point of view. But for them, it's just, yeah, what's wrong with that? Yeah. We're not saying they're bad. We're just saying, look, they act like this. Oh, okay. But for them, anyone I've said that to is just, oh, stop. That's just being silly. That's fine. Whereas the word black to describe someone is not allowed in Norwegian. Like, it would be a real no-no to say someone was black. You have to say they are a person with darker complexion. Because, and this is interesting, this is language again. Black in Norwegian means bad. So someone swearing would say black hell, or damn it to blackness, or something like that. So the concept of black because it has a negative context, they don't want to apply that to a set of people.
Yeah.
So they're saying, well, it's a person with dark complexion, not this concept of being bad by being black.
Mm.
So again, that's a language influencing thing, not on a storytelling level, but on a minute level, which then rolls up into, well, you have to find something funny. So what do you go to if you're not allowed to do certain things, or you don't have the leeway to do certain things?
Yeah. So you hit. I guess this is where you sort of the linguistics versus innate character versus this, that, and the other debate. That is language shaped by a society? So the way a society is indicates which words people invent, which words die out. Is society shaped by language? Because certainly in sort of the political and internet censorship arenas, there's huge discussion about whether what we call things matter. I mean, if you use bad words, is it actually causing people issues? Is being an abusive kind of a person making you more of an abusive kind of a person or not? So I think certainly there are complex psychological theories that say that your language shapes you. So to take it to extreme overview, that kind of makes sense. You sort of take Spinoza's concept that you can't think of something that you can't conceive. So if you don't have a word to describe something, you can't talk about it, think about it, because you don't have a descriptor. So we are confined by our language. So to that extent, the boundaries of language shape people. So a different language is potentially going to have different boundaries.
Yeah, and you even see that between American English and UK English or Australian English, that there are certain concepts that when you try and explain them from a UK perspective to an American perspective, you have to use more than one word.
Yeah.
And vice versa, obviously. So that's quite interesting. Some things are annoying me about. I'm finding a language changing is getting quite annoying these days. So I was watching a video today, and someone said, "I got the receipt. I got the receipt," and they were talking about the proof. Receipt now means proof. That's annoying. No, receipt is a specific thing. It's related to the word receive, because you have received something and got a receipt to say that it has been received. It is not proof of anything. So she had a screenshot of a text conversation, and she was like, "This is a receipt." Oh, really? Do we have to change the language like that?
I hate to
we
break
had a perfectly good word.
I hate to break it to you, but next up on the list is you complaining about youngsters playing on your lawn.
Yeah, pretty much. You've
started muttering about that. They're not using language the way I want them to. You've become old and curmudgeonly, Simon.
Yeah, unfortunately so.
To return vaguely to language shaping people or people shaping language, that it occurred to me while you were making your valid, if somewhat curmudgeonly, get off my lawn point about the Odyssey, where Homer talks about the wine dark sea. And for years, academics were praising this as a metaphor, that he was talking about various things, and like there's a parallel between wine and staring into it in the way you stare into a goblet of wine and so on. And then a new theory emerged that at the time of Homer, the Greeks didn't see the same colors.
Mm.
That they called it the wine dark sea because to Homer, a goblet of wine and the sea were close enough to the same color that they called them the same color.
Mm.
So they didn't have the separate ones. And it was only once people had sort of, we got to Newton, who split the rainbow up, so split light into colors, and then it went a little bit far the other way, that indigo doesn't actually exist. That for Richard of York gave battle in vain for remembering the colors of the rainbow. You learn it in school, but actually if you divide a spectral spread up into equal chunks, indigo doesn't exist. Violet and indigo overlap. So it's not a color. It only exists because we have a word for it. It doesn't exist. So if people can debate whether or not a color exists, if you think the color exists, you can see it. If you don't think the color exists, you can't see it. Then clearly the light is objective. It's there. So it's the description, the language that's shaping it, that's meaning whether you can see it or not. Well, it's not necessarily language, but your belief, whether you believe it there or not.
Well, it's just the specialization of your brain. So I read about this. There's an African tribe who their language specifies shade or tone rather than color. So if they're shown a bunch of colors, they can't see the difference between them because they're all the same shade, like, the level of light in them. Whereas if you show them the color yellow and one of them is like a slightly different yellow, they'll go, oh, that one's the different one. Whereas anyone who's learned the other way around, who knows colors and hasn't learned by shade, would go, I can't see a difference between those yellows. They all look the same.
Yeah.
But that was quite interesting as well. It's the human mind adapting to the environment around it, which, I guess brings us back to our original point that then, in a way, your language is your potential range of things that you can express.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't have a certain concept or has a specific structure, then your mind is just going to grow in that way. Anyway, that was quite interesting. I don't know if you have anything else to add before we end, Dave?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered Spinoza, we've covered Homer, we've covered Get Off My Lawn. I think we've run the gamut of human experience, really.
Yeah, you've shown off and I've complained, so perfect.
It's not my fault I had an expensive and slightly odd education. Hundreds of facts in my head.
You're the next Stephen Fry.
Oh, I wish. That man is worrying. Yes.
Yeah. He is very, very smart. So yeah, I think we'll end there, and we shall thank everyone. Thank you all for watching, and we shall see you next week.
Bye for now.